Welcome again. I'm Michelle McLean, and I'm with Lee Eisenman, and we are part of formerly the Avalor team, now the Zscaler team, and we're excited to talk to you a little bit today about the solutions that we are bringing to the Zscaler family. The Zscaler customer base has been incredibly warm and receptive. Vulnerability management is a very long-standing problem that's not been easy to solve, and Zscaler customers are a perfect fit for the kind of solution that we were bringing to market. So we're excited to walk you through what we're doing. We will cover the solution a little bit conceptually, and then I'll hand it over to Lee for a live demo. And as I mentioned, please go ahead and ask questions in the Q&A window. All righty, I'm going to minimize all of your faces, and then we'll take it from here. So we really see that data and more data and better data and enriched data and correlated data is the foundation for improving all sorts of security operations. And what we're able to talk about today is how better data can enable more effective vulnerability management. If you think about this, this landscape, companies have more and more tools. There's more and more data actually out there, but there's still plenty of questions that CISOs and other security leaders really struggle to answer. I'm deploying CrowdStrike, for example. Is it everywhere it's supposed to be? Our most critical apps, what kind of state are they in? How vulnerable are they? What should I be worried about on that front? The age-old question, how many assets do we actually have? If you've got 4 different tools that have a summation of the asset count, you probably have 4 different answers for how many assets you have. And then there's the more challenging, sort of slightly more profound questions. What's our risk posture today? How is it different than it was a month ago? Are we trending in the right direction? Are we making progress? These are difficult to answer. Some of them should be easier than they are today. And again, we really think that data is at the heart of solving these challenges. So why is it tough to understand risk posture today? Pretty much every security tool you have repeats the same process and provides the same functions in a particular domain. So it looks to collect state about something. It looks to then understand the state and analyze sort of risk in that domain. And then 2 outcomes. It might report on something, and it hopefully gives you a way to address that risk that it's found. And this happens over and over again in all your different tools. So it happens in your endpoint tool, and then again in your assets tool, and your cloud tool, and identity tool, all your AppSec stuff. And again, there's just a proliferation of these, and that same core process is happening in every single one of them. There's another dimension to the challenge as well, which is that every time a tool is looking to provide some level of intelligence, for instance, at the analysis layer, that's a vendor-defined notion of how they understand risk to be. In the reporting, it's a vendor-defined notion of here are the metrics that matter, and here's how you would measure that SLA. And in the addressing of risk, it tends to be fairly narrow and fairly constrained by the vendor in terms of what your workflows can be for remediating risk. So you end up with 2 primary challenges. You have a bunch of data, but it's all sitting in silos. It's not interconnected. Even though multiple tools might be talking about the same thing, it's all separated. And the second layer is that intelligence, analysis, definitions of risk, et cetera, all live in a black box, and you can't control them or affect the math. So this is what the team, formerly Avalor, set out to change. The team behind this technology really understands data well. And so they looked across the security landscape and started asking, what if instead of all these different tools, what if we could collect state really broadly from lots of different tools in lots of different formats, and have it all come into a single sort of data lake, if you will? And then what if against that, we could compile that information, correlate that information, and enrich our view of any single entity to the degree that we could contextualize risk a lot better? And what if in the analysis of what is risky and how risky is one thing versus another, what if we could provide transparency into how the calculations are performed and let you customize them? And then for the primary outcomes of reporting and remediation or risk mitigation, what if we could do this based on this, consistent, continuously updated data set, right? By the time you're doing analysis today, you're often pulling things into Excel, and it's weeks later that you get your pretty pictures. What if we could also look at that data from any lens? What if I want to look from a user perspective today and an application perspective tomorrow and an asset perspective next week? Being able to pivot amongst all those perspectives of risk. And then in terms of getting the work done to improve our security posture, what if we could customize those workflows? So that's what we set out to build. And we do that in what we call our data fabric. So the technology that Zscaler acquired with Avalor is sort of twofold. It runs at two levels. One is the data fabric, which I'm going to walk you through, and then one is at the application layer. What are the modules or solutions that can take advantage of that data fabric? And the cool thing is that in a Zscaler context, there are many, many more applications that we can work on much more quickly to take advantage of the data fabric. So looking at it from a vulnerability perspective and from the perspective of the data fabric's operations. So first off, starting with data feeds, right? We're going to populate this data fabric with information. So we have pre-built connectors into a variety of data sources. The first is a set of vulnerability feeds that you would expect to be part of a vulnerability management program, right? The scanning finds from a Tenable, a Qualys, a Rapid. And then you want not just to have the CVEs and the CVSS score of those CVEs, but you also want to understand, is it getting exploited in the wild? And so you want threat intel feeds to make that exploit data paired with the CVE data so you know which ones to worry about. This is fairly fundamental and crucial, but we would say, certainly not everything you want. And so what we bring to the table is connectors into, 150 other systems that give you many more other kinds of security findings, gap findings, where do you have a security gap, and context. So it might be business context, behavior context, things like that. So you can see across this smattering of example logos, we're talking about cloud insights and app dev insights, what's happening in the Zscaler infrastructure on ZTE, on the Zero Trust Exchange, for example. You see an asset count there, EDR tools. All of this context really informs a lot more about what's happening in the environment. So all of these discrete little data points, we call them entities, come into the data fabric. And the magic of the data fabric is in stitching that all together, in seeing the connections amongst those things, in seeing that this and this and this are all the same asset, but each tool brings a little bit more of the picture about what's happening with that asset. Bringing that all together, deduplicating the findings, correlating the findings, and enriching the findings. This is where we really learn to understand what's happening in the environment. That's the work of the data fabric for security. And that will underlie a variety of solutions, as I mentioned. And today, what we're doing is bringing that into reports and workflows oriented around improving vulnerability management. I'm going to pause for a beat and just check if there are any questions that we should take right now.
No
Lee?
questions have come in so far.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
All right. So when you have this level of context, let's look at a real world example of the ramifications of that. You might have a couple of assets that have CVEs with the same score, okay? But if you, on the one hand, you learn from one of these assets that it's got, CrowdStrike's loaded and it's sitting in dev. Okay, I'm worried a lot less about that particular finding. But I could have the same kind of finding with a similar score and then learn, okay, this one's actually open to the internet. My SysAkev database tells me that there's a known exploit against it. I learn from DSPM or my identity information that this is a user or a system that has access to PII. And maybe I'm watching my results out of Proofpoint or KnowBe4, and I learn, oh my gosh, this user consistently fails phishing tests and clicks on those links all the time. This is a very different profile. And now I'm much more concerned about that same vulnerability that initially looked fairly benign. Now I'm more concerned about the opportunity for that to pose a problem and put my information and my systems at risk. So this is all handled, this prioritization of sort of what increases and decreases risks, the risk factors and the mitigating controls. This is all codified in our platform, and we give you a starting point because a blank slate is super hard. It creates too much work. So we come out of the gate with an opinionated idea of what should look risky, but then we let you manipulate that at any point, at any time to adjust it for your definition. So if the base score tied to vulnerability information maybe you don't want to weight that as highly. Maybe you want to increase the weighting for your mitigating controls and your risk factors. You have all the ability to do that. And you can set your parameters for how you want these calculations to happen. And don't worry about whether in a given instance you do or don't have a given piece of data. The math will still work even if a single data point isn't present for it. But overall, you get your overall view and definition of what is risky applied across all of the findings. So vulnerability management is one of the cornerstones of what Gartner has taken to be calling continuous threat exposure management. We've actually seen customers change the names of their programs and think more broadly about, shifting their mindset from vulnerability management to exposure management. Part of the challenge is that vulnerability management makes people think pretty much of just CVEs, when in reality, we have many more areas that we should be concerned about. So in each of the 5 steps of this process of continuous threat exposure management, the UVM solution can make an enormous difference. So scoping has to do with, are you taking a broad enough view? Are you looking at the extended set of assets that you should be looking at? We clearly do that because we can take any kind of data point into consideration. Discovery, are you looking at things again beyond a CVE? Are you looking at misconfigurations? Are you looking at where you're missing a control? Absolutely. Again, any kind of data point that's out there can be part of how you calculate and diagnose the level of risk for an asset. Prioritization. I love this point. It's not just about what is more important, but also what is less important. And we've had customers come to us where the percentage of times that we are lowering something is not super high, but they really appreciate that they don't have to pay attention to that. And then they really like as well when maybe there's only a handful of mediums, but a couple of those actually really, really matter. Turns out that the surrounding information, the additional context shows that to be a major priority. That's very, very helpful. You want prioritization to be as nuanced, as contextualized, and as personal to your org as possible. And that's what our system does. Validation is a crucial step. This is sort of where you're doing things like breach attack simulation, and you're saying, okay, if they were to try to attempt this, would they succeed? We won't claim that the UVM solution helps you very much here. There's usually a set of discrete solutions for that. And then mobilization. This is how are we going to operate against this potential risk? And here again, we have a tremendous amount of help in terms of the workflows, and Lee will walk you through those. So we see vulnerability management, especially contextualized vulnerability management that we're able to give you, as very crucial to the CTEM. So I'm going to hand things off here to Lee. I will pause again one more second to see if any other questions had come in.
All right. So again, my name is Lee Eisenman, Senior Sales Engineer with Zscaler, and I'm super excited to show you the platform today for Unified Vulnerability Management. Again, if you have any questions as I go through this, please type them into the chat, into the Q&A, and Michelle will let me know that there's a question. So I want to start with discussing how we get data into the platform. Like Michelle showed you in the presentation, we support hundreds of different we have pre-built connectors for hundreds of different sources, things like traditional vulnerability management tools like Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable, cloud security posture management like Wiz, Orca, Aqua Security, and others, data security posture management like Cyera you see here, and others, SAST, DAST, SCA tools that are doing code analysis like Sneak, Veracode, and others. All of these tools are ultimately already deployed in your environment, and they're bringing to your attention issues or misconfigurations or findings or vulnerabilities, whatever the term is that they use for it. But you've got all these different signals coming in, as Michelle explained. So what Avalor is doing is allowing you to aggregate all of that into a single platform. And so here's exactly how we do that. And there's basically 2 fundamental ways to get data into the platform. The more common one is to leverage these connectors, like I've explained or shown, and then you can just search for one, for example, like Qualys. And then we have an API connection for it. So you establish the API credentials, enter them here, specify the frequency that you want Avalor to pull data into the platform from the core system, and then you're good to go. And the second method is that included in this list of connectors, if I come back to them, there's one here, any source, which is a special category. This is basically a placeholder for anytime you have a data export or from a platform that either an API doesn't exist for, or for one reason or another, you'd choose to get the data in manually rather than an automated API approach. This also works really well for data sources that don't have APIs, like a proprietary system that you've built yourself, or like a pen test or something like that. And you can do a one-time export and then just upload the file here, or we can operationalize it very similar conceptually to an API, but just by having, like, you write a script that pushes the file to AWS S3 bucket or GCP, and then we pull it from there. In fact, it notifies us anytime there's an update, so it's on demand. Or we can even do a webhook where we give you this webhook address that's specific to your tenant, and then you can push the file that way. So any questions so far, Michelle, on this section?
Yes, actually we do.
Okay.
API integration, is it pull only, or can you push from a source like a SIM?
Yes. So I think that question probably came in just before I posted this. So yes, you can push via webhook as I show here. So we absolutely support both.
Yep.
I'm looking at the questions now. So yeah, I say there's a question about official list of connections that we support. I think, sorry, not I think, but you can go to avalor.io/integrations. When we send a follow-up, we'll probably provide that in the follow-up as well. But we've got a interactive page where you can search and select, like, CSPM or whatever the category is, and then see the different technologies. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to show, just to extend the discussion about pulling data in manually, is whether we pull the data in manually or it's coming from API. In either case, we have built the mapping. So this column on the left is all of the data that's coming in from the source, and then we associate it with a field from our data model. All of the available fields are on the right. And then in the middle is that union where we've already done mapping for this source. So we've said, for example, just to pick an easy one, asset name is the name of the field from this source, and it maps to a field called name in an entity called asset. So this is a straightforward exercise that is already done for pre-built connectors, but when you're doing one ad hoc, obviously there's not going to be a mapping already. So this is something that we expose to the end user. It's really intuitive. We also can provide you, support if you'd like our help doing it. It's no problem. We can do it on your behalf. One of the really powerful things here is that a couple of things. If there's a field that is important to you that's in the existing data source, but we don't have a place for it in our data model currently, the data model is extendable. So you can just come over here and say, this is an attribute of a finding, for example. So you click the plus button, and you can create a new field on the fly. You name it. We have a variety of different types of fields that it can be, like text or numbers, common ones, Boolean. And then that data from your source will then route to that field in our data model. And then as I go through the rest of the demo, you'll see how we leverage that. So once all the sources are connected, we're harmonizing the data for you, both within a source and across sources. So we're doing deduplication, we're standardizing, we're normalizing, so that we can give you that holistic view, not just of all of your assets, but of all of the issues or vulnerabilities or findings, whatever term you like to use. We use the term findings on our platform. All of the findings that those assets have. All right, so the next section we're going to go to is scoring or prioritization. This is probably the most popular driver for seeking out a tool that will help here, like we do in Unified Vulnerability Management, because customers convey that they have all of these sources, all of these systems that are telling them, I often say, yelling at them, hey, you got to do this, you got to do that. And the question is, okay, I hear all of you, but I can't deal with all of you right now. Which one should I deal with first? And The key point is I'd like to apply, as the customer, I'd like to apply my own scoring model or rubric for how to decide what to work on first. And so this is where we give you the ability to define that. And we like to refer to Avalor, the UVM platform, as a glass box because all of these configurations are transparent. We give you the ability to see how they're configured, but we also give you the ability to adjust them. As you can see, my cursor is blinking right here. If I wanted to change this field, which I'll explain in a second, from 30 down to 3 or something like that, it's very easy to do so. So stepping back just to walk through this, what we're doing here is we're defining the calculation for each finding. And we're saying that a certain percentage of the score, 25% in this case, although like I said, it can be adjusted, is from the CVSS score, the rating system that's used across the board to score CVEs. 5% from EPSS, which is a newer open source third-party data source that gives you a score for how prevalent the exposure is, or sorry, the exploit is, how likely it is to be exploited, how easy it is to be exploited, and that all rolls up into a score as well. Original severity score is whatever the source system is that reported it, what did they score it to be? Some of those tools have a rather customized version of scoring, although it's a bit limited, they still have a model. And so maybe you like that and you want to use that as a baseline and then add on to it. So we give you the ability to specify just what contribution that would have. But here down on the bottom section of the page is where it really gets personalized. So this is where any field from our data model, and again, I showed that to you briefly, and I talked about how you could even add and extend that data model. You can come here and pick any field you want. So for example, if I wanted to say the assets environment, because I want to treat production and development differently. So then I could say if it's production, I want to raise it by 10%. If it's development, I want to leave it alone or even reduce it. So you can specify it on your own. We've got a good baseline here to get you started, where we're saying if something's open to the web, increase it by 5%. If it's got PII on it, increase it by 20%. And you can see the rest of the list here. So any of the things here on the left, if they're true, the score will increase as compared to if it wasn't true. And the converse is true on the right. So anything on the right, if it's true, it's a reduction because it's something we want to give you credit for because the asset's behind the firewall or it's got DR on it or something like that. So this allows you to personalize the scoring, which will then be applied across the board on a continuous automated basis. So you set this up one time and then you don't have to worry about it. It's always applied. All right, so moving on then, here is where we see the findings all rolled up into what we refer to as tickets and broken out by the assignee or the actor, the person that should work on these. So you can define what we call the grouping logic, which defines how findings get aggregated into tickets, and then who they should be assigned to. And in fact, I want to show this screen real quick. This is a screenshot from an existing customer, but we've sanitized it. What this is showing is the power of that grouping, as well as prioritization, which we just talked about. So we started with about 7 million raw findings that came in in this case, it was Wiz and Qualys. And we grouped those findings into just over 3,000 tickets. So about a 2,000 or so to 1 ratio reduction, which is phenomenal. And then we went even further to take those 3,000 tickets and said 80 of them are critical based on the customer's definition or scoring model, as we just talked through, 690 are high and so forth. So that's the power of the grouping model in action. And as you can see here, what we've done is we've said, all right, anything that's related to workstations, we want to give it to the end user computing team. But then we group certain findings within that category together, whereas others are separate based on like, what is the vulnerable component? So here, just comparing these two tickets here, it's very easy to compare because the only thing different is that vulnerable component. You can see this ticket is an aggregate of all of the findings, the 12 findings across the 3 assets here that have Microsoft Edge on them on Windows workstations. And the second one right below it is 10 findings on 5 assets that have Microsoft Defender. So it wouldn't make sense to merge those two into a single ticket or to group those into a single ticket, because the thing you're going to do to resolve them is likely different, right? What you're going to do to fix a Microsoft Edge issue is probably different than what you're going to do to fix a Microsoft Defender issue. And by the way, we show you what to do right here. We say, here's the fix for these Microsoft Edge findings on these Windows workstations. We say, here's what you need to do. Apply this version of software to all of these Windows workstations that have Microsoft Edge, and that'll resolve the issue. One other thing to show you while we're here, just to tie back the scoring topic one last time. We showed you the page before, which I still have up right here as a reminder, that's showing you how you chose to define your scoring rubric. But now here it is in action. And so this is really nice. And again, the transparency really shines through here, where you're able to say, okay, why did this go from, right here it says we started at 9.6 and we ended up at 9.3. What is the math there? And so we're saying, well, here it is. Here's each of the components. Here's the percent contribution. So here's the actual portion of the score. And then you add all these numbers up and you end up with, in this case, 9.3. So it's very easy to see. And it's also, as a result, very easy to tune. If you feel like, you know, when I went and did it, this all looked great, but now when I see it in action, it doesn't feel right. I don't really think this should have been the most important item. You can look in and potentially catch something like this and say, okay, maybe this is given too much weight. Maybe I need to drop this from 20% down to a cap of 10 or something like that. So the point is you can very easily make those adjustments because we give you the visual of exactly how the scoring was applied.
I'm going to pause you for 1 second, Lee, because we got a
Sure.
typed question that I think is
Okay.
super valuable for the whole audience to hear. It's not directly related to where you are right now, but it's very foundational. The person asks, if I buy UVM, then I don't need my Tenable Rapid7 Qualys tool anymore. Excellent, excellent question. And as Lee said, you know, we're talking about grouping and collecting and reporting on a variety of findings. The UVM software itself does not do the scanning, does not make the findings, does not find the stuff. We are essentially a data aggregation platform. So the data is coming from somewhere else. And then what we're doing is handling that data, correlating that data, et cetera. But we do need another tool. Usually one of those three is in the customer's environment as that initial scanning tool. So great question. Yes, we need it.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. So the next thing I want to talk about while I'm here is a little bit deeper on workflows. So of course, we're using the term ticket, and this often triggers the question from customers, okay, so I see tickets in your platform. Are these, you know, the same tickets that I would see in my existing ticketing system, like Jira or ServiceNow or what have you? And so the answer is they can exist here and stay here. You can use the Avalor UVM platform as your platform, and you can administer workflow here if you want. As you can see, we have all of these different stages defined here. You can progress items through the stages. If there's an exception, you can, you know, document what the reason for the exception is. You can, you know, potentially approve the exception. And in fact, all of these stages, just like our scoring here, the ticket statuses, I was calling them stages, it's actually statuses. The ticket statuses are all customizable and definable as well. So again, we give you a starting point, much like this, to get started, but you can tweak this if you'd like. And if you have a ticketing system that you would like to integrate with, of course, we support that as well. So in this demo instance, we've set up an integration with both Jira and ServiceNow, purposefully to showcase that we can integrate with more than one at a time. And we picked, you know, the most popular two. But if you happen to have Sherwell or something else, we can support any ticketing system. We have connections to many of them. And then just like we had that any source, we also have an any target. So if you happen to use a ticketing system that we don't already have an integration with, then we can build it using that any target. And once you create the ticket, it just takes a couple seconds to do it. I click create ticket and it'll create it. And then once I've done that, the target ticketing system, in this case Jira, and UVM will stay in sync. So any changes that you make on either side will propagate back to the other side. So if you happen to have maybe some people who really like this interface and want to come in here and interact here, they can come in here and do their work, change it to acknowledged or whatever. Jira will get updated, and vice versa. If someone's living in Jira and never comes into this UI, that's okay. As they as they perform their work in Jira, it'll get updated on that side too. And then the last thing I'll mention on this topic is something that comes up quite often is customers voice a challenge they struggle with, which is as the vulnerability management team, we're not the ones that are actually doing the patches. We send reports out to people and the business, and they need to do the patching. They come back and they tell us it's patched, but then we have to go through this manual exercise of validating if that's actually what the tool like Qualys or Rapid7, whatever, reported the finding, whether it agrees. And so we have this concept here of undetected. And so what this means is, in this case, Qualys and Tanium told us about these Microsoft Edge findings. And because it's 0% undetected, that means 100% is still detected as a vulnerability, which means the business has not patched it yet, as far as Qualys and Tanium knows. So if we were in a circumstance where the business had said, I've patched this, and the source system is still saying they have not patched it, then the platform now can be configured with the business logic to reconcile that. Typically, what we would do is we would define some period of time, like say a week, because maybe the asset needs to be rebooted and you only allow reboots on a weekend or something like that. Maybe you don't scan every minute of every day, you scan weekly or monthly, whatever. So whatever that cadence is, we would set that timetable appropriately so that we can assume all of those things that would need to happen have happened. And then if it's still reporting as detected, not undetected, then the platform can be configured to take a follow-up action, like circle back with the person that reported it as remediated and ask them to take a second look. So this really can be a time saver and really can help operationalize and improve the business process. All right, so the last thing I'll do just in about 30 seconds or so, and then we'll see if there's any additional questions. So really, call to action. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them. I'm going to show you some dashboards. So we've focused so far on the practitioner's view of things. There's also some real value in our ability to produce dashboards that give executives and senior leadership understanding of what's happening as well. So our dashboards are all customizable. So I'll come in and I'll show one real quick live in the platform, this asset inventory dashboard. And you'll see here, if I click the pencil to edit it, I can do anything I want with these widgets. I can change the size of them. I can change their positioning. And I can even go into them and say, how is this constructed? So we give you some dashboards to start out with, but you can also build these from scratch. So you can come in and say, I want to see all of my assets broken out by asset type. And then you see 93 assets, here's the different asset type. And then you can also configure a filter to say, actually, I only want to look at cloud assets because I want this dashboard to be focused on cloud assets. So any of those fields in our data model can be a component for a filter. And then you see now we have 44 because only 44 of our assets are cloud assets. So it's very, very flexible, very customizable. You can change the representation graphically of the data as well. So here's a couple dashboards that we built using this custom dashboard capability. One customer said, we really struggle with keeping track of whether our existing tools have been deployed everywhere they're supposed to be. So they gave us the business logic and said, Carbon Black, for example, is supposed to be installed on Windows servers and all workstations. Can you help us make sure that it is? And then we built these two widgets with the filters and the logic I just walked through, but for that use case. And we were able to show them this. And so we gave them this dashboard. I took the screenshot right when we exposed them to the dashboard, but now they've operationalized it. So these numbers are far better. We can also show like obsolete software. You should never have software that's so out of date the vendor doesn't support it anymore, but do you have a mechanism for identifying where that is the case? And of course, if you have an exception because there's mitigating controls, it's not exposed to the internet, and the reason we haven't updated it is because the custom software that's running on that machine would break with the new update. You can indicate that in the in your data that's coming into the platform, a field for like exception granted for obsolete software or something like that, and then it wouldn't be included in this report. So only the things that are problematic obsolete software. We can give you with one entry. This is a log4j dashboard, but it's meant to represent the asset, the vulnerability du jour. So CNBC is all CNN, whatever. They're all reporting about this new WannaCry type whatever. And so the senior board leadership and the board comes and asks you, what's our exposure to this? Well, in one, you just type in the CVE and this entire dashboard comes out. You can send this to them every day. You can give them access to it. It allows you to give them the visibility they need so that you can focus on doing your work rather than going to all of your different systems that are each hopefully telling you about it, but you're having to pull that manually and aggregate that. So it allows you to spend time doing work rather than compiling the data. All right, Michelle, I think with that, we'll see if there's any other questions.
No, that's perfect. It's a great overview. We've had one that's come in and might be getting a typed answer, but I think it's worth repeating. It's an excellent observation. So there's a lot of customization here. Does that mean I have to build a bunch of stuff to get value out of the platform? That is such a great, it's a great observation, and it's a balancing point for most vendors. And usually if something is really customizable, it means exactly that there's a ton of upfront work. What we on this team have strived to do is give you a starting point. So yes, things are very customizable, but they are customizable. They are not just entirely custom. In other words, we give you an opinionated, informed starting point for risk calculations, for out of the box reports and dashboards, even for some workflows, because we've worked with enough customers to have an understanding of what often works. And then from there, we tweak and tune. So Lee has this wonderful phrase of like, I forget what you say, but it's like see, tweak. I forget what you say, but it's good. It's a good progression. But the short answer is you do get immediate value right out of the box because we understand how hard it would be to try to build it all from a blank slate. So we don't do that to you.
Yeah, I say that you can see it, you can adjust it, and you can extend it.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go. All righty. I'm just thinking about some other traditional questions that I sometimes get. Sometimes we get asked, do I have to deploy any kind of agent for this? No, you don't. We are, again, gathering data sources. And because this is sort of in the family in terms of Zscaler information, the exciting thing to think about is that there will be many opportunities to leverage this data fabric to serve many applications. So obviously this unified vulnerability management app is ready today. We are incorporating looking at how we're going to bring Risk 360 and feed Risk 360 out of the data fabric as well. And then there's a variety of risk management products coming soon, and some already released that will be tailored to run off of the data fabric. And the other really awesome thing about being in a Zscaler context is the richness of all the network level information and user level information that we will have from Zscaler data. And that will come in to, or be able to come in, it doesn't have to, but be able to come into the data fabric to, again, inform your view of risk, your view of security gaps, things like that. So unique data set, unique ability to handle data, really dramatically better security outcomes. That's essentially the logic flow for our platform. So we'll stay on another minute or so if anybody else types any questions. Very grateful for the collaboration and the questions along the way. Makes things a lot more fun for us to have an interactive session, and very well attended. So we're super happy to see you. In terms of next steps, you can get more information on the avalor.io site, and you can reach out to us there. And we will also be sending a note as follow-up. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much, Lee. Thank you to you for an excellent demo. Thank you to the audience for tuning in and for all your fabulous questions. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of your day.